The smell of roasted turkey filled Madison's house, mixing with the sound of laughter and clinking glasses. I should have felt excited about our family Thanksgiving, just like every year since Mom and Dad passed. But something felt different this time. The way everyone avoided my eyes when I walked in. The hushed conversations that stopped the moment I entered a room. There was this tension hanging in the air thick enough to cut with a knife. And then there was that mysterious family meeting they held last week, the one I somehow wasn't invited to. Truok hitoy kitiep hai chotoy biet banjang ng hetu. Tan po naun han like nu bantong so. Thanksgiving jang ho voy gya jin. Subscribe jeningethem hung kao chuyen that nay. Bai gyo hai kung toy kwai lai kan bep jai mui thom hung lai an chua sufan boy ma toy chua tung tuong tuong. Let me start from the beginning so you understand how deep this betrayal cut. My name is Elsa, and 2 years ago I lost both my parents in a car accident. It shattered our world, but we thought it brought us closer as siblings. My older sister Madison is 35, the type of person who always needs to be in control of every situation. She married Brad, a real estate agent who sees dollar signs in everything. My younger brother Tyler is 28, sweet but easily influenced especially by Madison. His wife Jessica loves drama more than breathing and spreads gossip faster than wildfire on social media. What made this Thanksgiving different was the inheritance issue that had been brewing for months. After Mom and Dad died, someone needed to take care of Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank, who had been living in the family house for 15 years. At 82 and 84, they needed round-the-clock care. Their arthritis made simple tasks impossible, and Grandpa Frank's memory had been slipping lately. Madison and Tyler immediately pushed for selling the house and splitting the money 3 ways. Their plan was simple: put our grandparents in a nursing home and cash out. The house was worth $400,000 in our neighborhood, and they saw it as easy money. Brad had already contacted real estate agents getting unofficial appraisals and talking about quick sales. But I could not bear the thought of abandoning Grandma and Grandpa when they needed us most. They had taken care of us when we were children, spending summers teaching us to garden and telling us stories on the porch. The idea of them sitting alone in some sterile facility, confused and heartbroken, made me physically sick. So I moved in with them. I quit my apartment lease, transferred to remote work, and dedicated myself to their care. I cooked their meals, managed their medications, drove them to doctor appointments, and sat with them during sleepless nights when old memories haunted them. This decision infuriated Madison and Tyler. They started calling me stubborn and unrealistic. Madison accused me of being selfish, claiming I was keeping the grandparents hostage for my own benefit. Tyler said I was preventing them from getting proper medical care. But what really bothered them was that Grandma and Grandpa clearly preferred my plan. The warning signs started appearing weeks before Thanksgiving. Madison called me on a Tuesday evening, her voice artificially sweet, inviting me to celebrate at her house instead of the family home where we had gathered for 20 years. She said she wanted to host this year and make new memories. Something about her tone made my stomach twist. Tyler started avoiding my phone calls and responding to text messages with one-word answers. When I bumped into him at the grocery store, he acted nervous and kept checking his watch like he had somewhere urgent to be. Jessica posted cryptic Facebook statuses about family members who refused to see reason, and some people being too selfish to care about others. Then I overheard a phone conversation between Brad and Madison when I stopped by to drop off some paperwork. They were whispering in the kitchen, and I heard Brad say something about the plan and making sure she agrees. When they saw me, they quickly changed the subject to weather and football. The night before Thanksgiving, Jessica posted a photo of her and Tyler looking serious with the caption, "Sometimes you have to make hard decisions for the good of everyone." The comments from Madison and Brad were just heart emojis, but something about that post made my skin crawl. Thursday morning, I dressed carefully and drove to Madison's house with a knot in my stomach. Their neighborhood always looked perfect for the holidays, with carved pumpkins still decorating porches and the first Christmas lights already twinkling in windows. When I knocked on the door, Madison hugged me longer than usual, and her smile seemed forced. Brad shook my hand with both of his, which he never did. Tyler avoided eye contact, completely busying himself with arranging firewood that was already perfectly stacked. Even the children, 8-year-old Chloe and 6-year-old Jake, who normally ran to hug me the moment I arrived, stayed close to their parents and gave me cautious waves instead. Something had definitely poisoned the well against me, but I had no idea how deep it went. The tension became unbearable during dinner preparations. Madison kept making comments about family decisions and everyone needing to compromise. She assigned me to set the table, usually Tyler's job, while she and Jessica whispered in the kitchen and shot glances in my direction. Brad dominated the conversation with stories about recent house sales in the area, emphasizing how property values were rising and how smart families were cashing in on opportunities. He mentioned several elderly homeowners who had made the wise choice to sell and move into assisted living facilities. Tyler nodded along with everything Brad said, occasionally adding comments about how expensive home maintenance was becoming and how difficult it was to properly care for aging family members without professional help. His words felt rehearsed, like he had practiced this speech. When we finally sat down to eat, the atmosphere was suffocating. Madison kept steering conversations toward the future, asking pointed questions about my long-term plans and whether I really thought I could handle taking care of our grandparents indefinitely. "You know, Elsa," she said, cutting her turkey with unnecessary force, "Brad found some really nice assisted living places. They have activities, medical staff, social opportunities. It might actually be better for Grandma and Grandpa than staying isolated in that big old house." Tyler jumped in immediately. "Yeah, and the staff there are trained professionals. They know how to handle memory issues and physical limitations. It's not fair to expect one person to do everything." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. "Plus, think about your own life. You're still young. You should be building your career, maybe finding someone special. Instead, you're stuck playing nurse 24/7. I tried to explain that our grandparents were happy at home, that they had specifically asked to stay there, and that I genuinely enjoyed caring for them. But every point I made was immediately countered with statistics about nursing home benefits or stories about other families who had made the transition successfully. The children were unusually quiet throughout dinner, picking at their food and glancing between the adults like they were watching a tennis match. Finally, Madison sent them upstairs to play, claiming they needed to let the grown-ups talk. That phrase sent ice through my veins. I had heard it before the night our parents sat us down to explain their divorce when I was 12. It was Madison's code for serious family business that will change everything. Brad cleared the dinner plates while Jessica refilled wine glasses. Madison disappeared into her home office and returned with a folder and legal pad. Tyler's face had gone pale, and he kept fidgeting with his napkin. "Okay," Madison announced, sitting back down and opening the folder. "We need to have an honest conversation about Grandma and Grandpa's situation, as a family." She began by listing what she called concerns about the current arrangement. According to her notes, I was overwhelmed and unable to provide adequate care. The house was too old and not equipped for elderly residents with mobility issues. The isolation was harmful to their mental health. The financial burden was unsustainable. Tyler read from his own prepared statement about the emotional toll on everyone when family members were not receiving optimal care. He mentioned researching local facilities and finding several with excellent reputations and immediate availability. Brad presented a financial analysis showing the costs of home modifications, medical equipment, and round-the-clock care versus the benefits of selling the house and using the proceeds for professional care facilities. His numbers were detailed and seemed carefully calculated to support their predetermined conclusion. Jessica talked about the impact on family relationships, claiming that the current situation was creating resentment and division among siblings. She suggested that making a change would allow everyone to spend quality time together instead of constantly worrying about caregiving responsibilities. I listened to their presentations with growing horror. This was not a family discussion. This was an intervention complete with prepared speeches and predetermined outcomes. They had clearly met multiple times without me planned their arguments and decided on their solution before I even arrived. "You've already made up your minds," I said quietly. "This isn't a conversation. It's an ambush." Madison's mask slipped slightly. "We're trying to do what's best for everyone, including you. But you won't listen to reason. You never do." "What exactly have you already decided?" I asked, though I was afraid of the answer. Tyler looked at Madison, who nodded permission for him to continue. "We've put deposits down at Sunset Manor. They have a beautiful couples suite available. Grandma and Grandpa could move in next month. And we've already gotten preliminary estimates on the house," Brad added. "The market is hot right now. We could have it listed and sold within 60 days. Without asking them what they want, I stood up my chair, scraping loudly against the floor. "Without asking me," Jessica's voice turned sharp, "you've made it clear you don't care about anyone else's opinions. You just do whatever you want and expect everyone to go along with it." The accusations came flooding out then. Madison accused me of manipulating our grandparents and turning them against the rest of the family. Tyler said I was being selfish and unrealistic about what was best for elderly people. Brad questioned my motives, suggesting I was more interested in securing my inheritance than providing proper care. Jessica was the most brutal, claiming I had always been the difficult one who caused family drama and refused to compromise on anything. She said everyone was tired of walking on eggshells around me and pretending my stubbornness was somehow admirable. I felt like I was drowning in their coordinated attack. Every point I tried to make was immediately dismissed or twisted into evidence of my unreasonableness. They had clearly spent weeks preparing their case and anticipated every argument I might raise. After 2 hours of relentless pressure, Madison stood up and smoothed her dress. Her face had transformed from fake sweetness to cold determination. She walked to the sideboard and picked up a wine glass, holding it like she was about to make a toast. "All right," she said, her voice carrying a finality that made my blood freeze. "Since you refuse to listen to reason or work with us on a solution that benefits everyone, we've had to make a difficult decision." Tyler, Brad, and Jessica all straightened in their chairs like actors who had been waiting for their cue. The coordination was chilling. 3 weeks ago," Madison continued, "we held a family meeting to discuss this situation. A democratic family meeting where every adult member got to voice their opinion and cast a vote." My stomach dropped. "What kind of vote?" "A vote about whether you should remain a part of this family's decision-making process." Brad answered, his real estate agent smile nowhere to be seen. "Whether you've proven yourself capable of putting family welfare above your own stubborn preferences." Jessica leaned forward with barely concealed excitement. We each got to explain our position and cast a ballot. It wasn't personal, Elsa. It was just business. Family business. Tyler looked miserable but nodded along. "We tried to include you in discussions for months, but you wouldn't budge on anything. You made it impossible to reach a compromise." Madison raised her wine glass higher. The vote was unanimous among all participating family members. Tyler voted yes. Brad voted yes. Jessica voted yes. I voted yes. Yes to what, exactly? I asked, though I already knew the answer was going to destroy me. "Yes to the proposition that you are no longer considered a voting member of this family," Madison announced, her voice ringing with self-righteous authority. "We voted, and you are not family anymore." The room erupted in applause. Tyler clapped slowly and sadly, like he was attending a funeral. Brad clapped enthusiastically, like he had just closed a profitable deal. Jessica clapped and actually cheered, bouncing slightly in her seat. "From this point forward," Madison continued over the applause, You have no say in family decisions regarding our grandparents, the house inheritance matters, or any other family business. You are not invited to family gatherings. You will not be included in holiday celebrations. The children will not be allowed to visit you." Tyler added, "We even asked Chloe and Jake what they thought about Aunt Elsa always causing arguments at family events. They said they wished everyone could just get along and be happy." "So you see," Jessica chimed in, "even the children support this decision. It's truly unanimous. You're out." Brad produced an official-looking document from Madison's folder. "This is a family charter we've drafted. It formally establishes the voting members of our family unit and the decision-making process for major issues. Your name has been removed from the list of recognized family members." I stared at them in complete shock. These were people I had grown up with, shared Christmas mornings with, cried with when our parents died. And they had just voted me out of existence like I was a contestant on a reality television show. "You can't be serious," I whispered. "Completely serious," Madison replied. "You forced our hand, Elsa. Your selfish refusal to compromise left us no choice but to remove you from the equation entirely." "We're not doing this to hurt you," Tyler said, though his words sounded hollow. "We're doing this to protect the family from further damage." The cruelty of their planning hit me in waves. They had spent weeks organizing this ambush. They had involved the children in their conspiracy. They had prepared legal documents and official procedures. This was not a spontaneous decision made in anger. This was calculated elimination. But instead of breaking down or pleading with them, something unexpected happened. I started laughing. Softly at first, then louder. The sound surprised even me. "Something funny?" Brad asked, looking annoyed that his big moment was not having the intended effect. "Actually, yes," I replied, reaching into my purse and pulling out a brown folder that I had brought with me. "I guess you won't be needing this anymore." I placed the folder on the table between the wine glasses and dinner plates. Everyone stared at it like it might explode. "What is that?" Madison demanded. "Oh, just some paperwork that Grandma and Grandpa asked me to bring tonight," I said casually. "They thought the family should know about some changes they've made recently. But since I'm not family anymore, I suppose it's none of my business." Tyler looked nervous. "What kind of changes?" "Why don't you open it and see?" I suggested. "But remember, you just voted me out of the family. So whatever is in that folder has nothing to do with me anymore." Madison snatched the folder and opened it with trembling hands. Her face went white as she read the first document, then red with rage, then white again. "What does it say?" Jessica asked impatiently. Madison's hands were shaking so badly she could barely hold the papers. This can't be." "What is it?" Tyler grabbed the folder and started reading. His face went through the same color changes as Madison's. Brad leaned over Tyler's shoulder, and I watched his expression transform from smug confidence to absolute horror. The first document was a new will dated 6 months earlier, leaving the entire family estate to me. The house, the savings accounts, the investment portfolio, even Grandma's jewelry collection. Everything. The second document was a deed transfer signed by both grandparents and notarized the previous month. The house was no longer part of any potential inheritance. It was already mine. The third document was a change of beneficiary form for their life insurance policies and retirement accounts. My name was listed as the sole beneficiary for everything. Madison finally found her voice and started screaming. Actually screaming like someone was physically attacking her. "This is fraud. They're too old to make these decisions. We'll contest everything." Tyler was frantically flipping through pages looking for some loophole or mistake. "There has to be an explanation. They wouldn't do this. They wouldn't give you everything." Brad was already calculating losses in his head, muttering numbers under his breath, and pulling at his hair. Jessica was recording everything on her phone, probably planning to post about this dramatic turn of events on social media within the hour. "How long have you known about this?" Madison demanded, pointing an accusing finger at me. I found out about it yesterday, I answered honestly. Grandpa Frank called me into his study and handed me that folder. Said I should bring it to Thanksgiving dinner so the whole family could be informed together. Yesterday. Tyler looked confused. But we've been planning this intervention for weeks. I know, I replied. They know too. Grandma and Grandpa have been aware of your little meetings and your plans to sell the house and ship them off to a nursing home. They've heard every phone call, seen every real estate estimate, and witnessed every family discussion about their future. The room fell silent except for Madison's heavy breathing and Jessica's frantic phone typing. They made these changes because they wanted to see who really cared about them as people versus who saw them as financial opportunities. I continued. They've been testing all of us for months, and apparently, I was the only one who passed. Madison lunged across the table, grabbing my arm with desperate strength. You have to share this. We're family. You can't keep everything. But you just voted me out of the family, I reminded her calmly. Remember unanimous decision. I'm not family anymore, so why would I share anything with strangers? Tyler jumped up from his chair, pacing around the dining room like a caged animal. This is insane. We're blood relatives. You can't just steal our inheritance. I didn't steal anything, I replied. Grandma and Grandpa made their own choices about their own property. They're both mentally competent adults with the legal right to distribute their assets however they choose. Brad was frantically Googling information about contesting wills on his phone. There are laws about this undue influence. Elder abuse. We'll take this to court. Good luck with that, I said. They worked with their attorney for 6 months to make sure everything was legally bulletproof. They also documented their reasons extensively, including recordings of family members discussing selling their home and forcing them into institutional care against their wishes. Jessica finally looked up from her phone. Recordings? What recordings? Did you really think they were asleep every time you came over to measure rooms and take photos for real estate listings? I asked. Or when you had loud conversations about nursing home costs and inheritance distributions right outside their bedroom window? The family exchanged horrified glances. They had been so focused on their secret planning that they never considered their grandparents might be listening and planning their own response. Madison tried a different approach, suddenly becoming tearful and emotional. Please, Elsa, think about Chloe and Jake. They deserve something from their great-grandparents. Don't punish the children for our mistakes. The children will be fine, I answered. In fact, they'll probably be better off learning that actions have consequences and that treating elderly family members like disposable burdens has a cost. Tyler sat back down heavily, putting his head in his hands. What about the nursing home deposits? We put down $5,000. And Brad's already started the paperwork to list the house. That sounds like a problem for people who made assumptions about other people's property, I replied. None of that was authorized by the actual homeowners. Brad's face was getting redder by the minute. You manipulated them, you isolated them, and filled their heads with lies about us. I cooked their meals, managed their medications, read them books, watched old movies with them, and listened to their stories about the good old days, I said. If you call that manipulation, what would you call secretly planning to sell their home and institutionalize them without their consent? Jessica was still trying to find an angle. But what about family unity? What about forgiveness? What about working together? Those are beautiful concepts, I agreed. You should have thought about them before holding a secret vote to exile me from the family. Madison was spiraling into full panic mode now. We'll contest the will. We'll prove you coerced them. We'll get lawyers. You're welcome to try, I said, standing up and collecting my purse. But you might want to read the rest of the documents in that folder first, especially the statements your grandparents wrote explaining their decision-making process and their feelings about each family member's behavior over the past 2 years. Tyler grabbed the folder and started reading again, this time more carefully. His face crumpled as he read his grandmother's words about being disappointed in his lack of visits and his apparent eagerness to cash in on her death. She says I only call when I need money, he whispered. She says I treat her like a burden instead of a person, Madison read from her own section. Brad found his evaluation and went completely silent. Apparently, being described as a vulture circling the family's assets was not easy to read aloud. Jessica discovered that she had been characterized as someone who spreads gossip and creates drama instead of supporting family unity. They wrote these statements 6 months ago, I explained, right after the first time they heard you discussing nursing home options. They've been watching and listening ever since, documenting every interaction, every comment, every sign of impatience or greed. The weight of their grandmother's disappointment and their grandfather's hurt feelings was finally sinking in. These were not abstract financial documents. These were personal letters from people they claimed to love, explaining exactly how much their behavior had wounded them. "We can fix this," Tyler said desperately. "We can apologize. We can start over. We can be better." "You can certainly try," I agreed, "but not with access to their home or their finances, and not with me as an intermediary. Remember, I'm not family anymore." Madison made one final attempt at negotiation. "What if we reverse the vote? What if we officially reinstate you as family?" I looked around the table at their desperate faces, thinking about all the months of pressure, criticism, and emotional manipulation they had put me through. Thinking about their willingness to discard me the moment I became inconvenient. "You know what?" I said finally. "I think I like your original vote better. If this is how family members treat each other, then I don't want to be family anymore either." I walked toward the front door while they continued arguing behind me, blaming each other for the disaster they had created. Tyler was angry at Madison for pushing the vote. Madison was furious with Brad for encouraging the nursing home plan. Brad was accusing Jessica of making everything worse with her dramatic social media posts. "You can't just leave," Madison shouted after me. "We need to figure out what happens next." "What happens next is that you respect the decisions your grandparents made about their own lives and property," I called back, "and you learn to live with the consequences of treating people like obstacles to be removed instead of human beings to be loved." I drove home through the crisp November evening, feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight of their constant pressure and criticism was finally off my shoulders. I didn't have to attend any more family meetings where I was outnumbered and attacked. I didn't have to justify my choices to people who had already made up their minds to oppose everything I did. The first week after Thanksgiving was admittedly difficult. Despite everything that had happened, losing my entire family overnight was painful. I found myself reaching for my phone to call Tyler about something funny I had seen, or wanting to text Madison about a recipe before remembering that those relationships were over. But Grandma Rose and Grandpa Frank were incredible sources of comfort and wisdom during that adjustment period. They had experienced similar family divisions in their own lives and understood the complex emotions involved in setting boundaries with people you love. "Family isn't just about blood," Grandma told me one evening as we sat on the porch watching the sunset. "It's about who shows up when you need them, who treats you with respect, and who loves you without conditions or expectations." Grandpa Frank added his own perspective. "Sometimes the hardest thing about doing the right thing is that it makes you feel alone for a while. But eventually you realize that being alone with your integrity is better than being surrounded by people who don't value you." Over the following months, I discovered they were absolutely right. Without the constant stress of family drama and guilt trips, I was able to focus on building a life that actually made me happy. My work performance improved because I wasn't constantly distracted by emotional manipulation and family crises. I started making friends with our neighbors, people who appreciated my dedication to caring for elderly relatives instead of criticizing it. Mrs. Patterson from next door began stopping by with fresh cookies and staying to chat with Grandma about gardening. Mr. Chen from across the street offered to help with yard work and household repairs. These new relationships felt genuine and supportive in ways my family relationships never had. Nobody was keeping score or expecting me to prove my worth. Nobody was plotting behind my back or holding secret meetings to discuss my shortcomings. I was simply accepted and valued for who I was. The legal challenges Madison threatened never materialized. Their lawyer apparently explained that elderly people have the absolute right to distribute their assets as they choose, as long as they're mentally competent. Since Grandma and Grandpa had documented their decision-making process so thoroughly, and since their reasons were based on actual behavior they had witnessed, there was no basis for a successful contest. Tyler made a few attempts to reconcile, sending apologetic texts and showing up at the house unannounced. But his apologies always came with conditions and expectations. He would be sorry for hurting my feelings, but I needed to understand his financial pressures. He regretted the family vote, but I had to admit I had been stubborn and difficult. These non-apologies made it clear that he still didn't understand what he had done wrong. He was sorry about the consequences of his actions, but not sorry about the actions themselves. He wanted forgiveness without accountability and reconciliation without genuine change. Madison's attempts at contact were even more transparent. She would call asking about Grandma's health, but every conversation quickly turned to questions about the will, the house value, or whether I had reconsidered sharing the inheritance. Her concern for our grandparents' well-being was obviously secondary to her interest in their assets. Jessica continued posting vague social media complaints about ungrateful family members and people who think they're better than everyone else. But her attempts to generate sympathy backfired when mutual friends started asking questions about what had actually happened. Apparently, voting someone out of your family doesn't look as reasonable to outsiders as it does in your own echo chamber. Brad eventually stopped all contact entirely, probably realizing that his real estate commissions were not going to materialize, and that maintaining a relationship with me served no financial purpose for him. The most heartbreaking part was losing regular contact with Chloe and Jake. But even that situation improved over time. Kids are smart, and they eventually started asking their parents uncomfortable questions about why Aunt Elsa wasn't at family gatherings anymore. The official story about adult disagreements didn't satisfy them for long. During one of Tyler's awkward visits, Jake asked him directly, "Why can't Aunt Elsa come to Christmas if she takes such good care of great-grandma and great-grandpa?" Tyler's fumbling explanation about different opinions prompted Chloe to ask whether having different opinions was really bad enough to lose your whole family. Those innocent questions from the children started cracks in the family's unified narrative. It became harder to maintain that I was the unreasonable one when 8-year-olds could see the illogic in their position. As months passed, my life settled into a peaceful rhythm. Grandma and Grandpa thrived with consistent loving care in their familiar environment. Their doctor was amazed by the improvement in their physical and mental health, compared to the decline he typically saw when elderly patients were uprooted from their homes. I found a wonderful man named David who worked as a physical therapist and understood the value of caring for aging family members. Instead of seeing my commitment to my grandparents as a burden or limitation, he admired my dedication and often helped with their care. His presence brought even more warmth and joy into our household. My career flourished without the constant drain of family conflicts. I was promoted twice and received recognition for my work quality and reliability. Colleagues noticed the positive change in my demeanor and energy level, though I rarely explained the family situation that had caused such a dramatic improvement. Most importantly, I learned to trust my own judgment about relationships and boundaries. The experience taught me that not all family dysfunction can be fixed with love and patience. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to step away from toxic dynamics and let people experience the natural consequences of their choices. Grandma and Grandpa lived comfortably in their own home for 3 more years, surrounded by people who genuinely cared about their happiness and dignity. When they eventually passed away peacefully and at home, I had no regrets about the path I had chosen. The reading of their final will revealed one more surprise. They had added a codicil, specifically addressing the family conflicts expressing their disappointment in children and grandchildren who had prioritized money over relationships and their gratitude for the one family member who had loved them without conditions. Madison, Tyler, Brad, and Jessica were each left exactly $1 and a letter explaining why their inheritance had been limited to that symbolic amount. The letters detailed specific instances of their selfish behavior and their apparent eagerness to profit from elderly relatives' deaths. Even in death, my grandparents were teaching lessons about the importance of character integrity and genuine love. Today, when people ask me about my family, I smile and talk about the wonderful years I shared with my grandparents. As for the others, they are just people I used to know who taught me valuable lessons about the difference between relatives and real family. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is allow people to make their own choices and live with the results even when those choices hurt you. And sometimes the greatest gift you can give yourself is the freedom to walk away from people who vote you out of their lives instead of begging them to let you back in. Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with family members who didn't respect your values or choices? Have you experienced the challenge of caring for elderly relatives while dealing with family pressure to make different decisions? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Like this video, if the story resonated with you and reminded you that sometimes doing the right thing requires standing alone. Subscribe for more real stories about family challenges, personal growth, and finding your way through difficult relationships. Share this with someone who might need the reminder that their worth isn't determined by other people's votes or opinions. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that real family are the people who stand by you when times get tough, not the ones who abandon you when you become inconvenient. Wishing you the courage to choose love over money and integrity over approval, even when it costs you everything.